Hi everyone, Darren Hunter here, and of course Dennis Youssef. We are
Hi.
Inspired Growth Training, and today we have the lovely Jody Ford from the Coronis Group. Now, Jody is the Property Management Director with a group of officers, and all together they're managing, well, they're just about to exceed 7,800 managements. Jody, that's huge.
Gonna hit 8.
Yes,
Gonna
yes.
hit 8.
Won't be far away now.
Yeah, you'll get that before the year's out.
So before we get to your story, Jody, because I really want to bring that out today, there's so much I think to be said about that. But I just want to talk about Inspect Real Estate, IRE, and their online booking system. And I remember back in the day when that phone used to run hot, there were so many offices had so many problems with it. And IRE just came in with this amazing online booking system that just solved so many problems. But Jody, you're on such a big scale. How does IRE, the online booking system, how does it work for you guys?
Look, at this point in time, I love to talk about programs that we can't live without. So I think that's what IRE is for us at the moment. Excuse me. What we find is we just couldn't cope with that level of calls. The amount of inquiry that we have every day, it would just be an absolute full-time job for many, many people. So the problem that they solve there in getting the online booking, being able to manage that whole process is unbelievable for the industry.
Yeah.
When you look at how much Inspect Real Estate would cost you in comparison to how many staff you would have to employ just to answer the phone, forget about all of the other stuff it does, but just for the tenant inquiries, that's saving you, like for, let's say you had 8,000 doors, crikey, you'd be talking 10 staff.
Yeah, easily.
Just to answer tenant inquiries, you know, that's crazy when you think about it from that point of view.
It really is crazy. And I think that people who solve problems for agents or programs that solve problems for agents are you know, worth their weight in gold. And the number of staff that we save, and not just that, it's the constant distraction. I think when people are trying to focus on their work, having that constant distraction, or even having that happening in a receptionist perspective, it just answers so many things.
I remember that first demo I had. It was at a conference in Melbourne, and Andrew was actually at the stand doing the demonstration, and he put my phone in, and I got that text message that first time, and it was a no-brainer. My boss was standing next to me, and I said, "Why haven't we got this yet?" Like, you know, this is like from a BDM's point of view, and being able to use that as a tool to win more doors, it was just brilliant. I think what Inspect Real Estate, Mike and Andrew have obviously done for the industry is just next level.
Remember that all those times of having to bring people back if a property had been let, and doing, you know, obviously ringing those people with the positive call on, hey, we've got something else here, as opposed to ringing and saying, no, sorry, you've missed out on that one. And it just, fantastic.
Yeah.
Alrighty, guys, let's move on now. Before we get started, just for our audience, this is based on a video recording. We do have the PM Growth Expert Show. This is what this podcast is. We have it available on iTunes podcast. Plus, also, if you're Dennis, if they're on an Android, they can download it from Podbean as well. Alrighty, moving on now. Jody, you've been with Coronis since 2001. You're about to celebrate your 18th year anniversary with Coronis. Congratulations. I mean, that's an amazing feat, but even more, you've got, again, nearly 7,800 managements. Now, the spread of offices is from the Sunshine Coast in Queensland right down to the Gold Coast, over 24 offices, and out to Toowoomba as well. So for those people that are outside Australia, let's just say that's a big area to cover. And, you know, I think the name Coronis is very legendary for quality as well, and just achieving amazing things. So, Dennis, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Yeah. Before I jump in a little bit on the with the Coronis and the questions, I want to know, like, We're at the beginning of November. We've got 2 months to get 200 doors. Can we do it, Jody? Can we hit 8,000 before the 1st of January 2020? Can we do it?
I'm actually aiming for the end of January, to be honest with you. That's my goal. I find
Okay.
that things are really busy in that January period, so that's the plan.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing that news spread out across social media. But that's awesome. I mean, that's a lot of doors to get, and you never know, Jody. It could happen.
Yeah, it's a big focus at the moment because it's very frustrating with the amount of churn that we have in our offices. It's really incredible when you're talking about having to gain, 1,100 managements a month or a year to break even or to get just a little bit of growth. It is an astronomical amount of managements that we need to deliver on, and that's just a constant focus on working out how we replace that churn and then go about getting the net gain after that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I remember when I was working for Integrity Real Estate, we hit 400, but it took, oh my goodness, 18 months to get to 500. But we kept on looking at that 500 because it was that halfway goal for us to get to 1,000 doors. And it took so long. But once we cracked the 500, 600, 700, 800, 900, it all came. It just flowed, So it's interesting. So, okay, 2001 is when you started with Coronas, but when did you start and why did you start in real estate?
Wow, that's an interesting story. So I've been in real estate now for 35 years. It's been a very long journey and something that I don't think that I will ever not do. Mm-hmm. And really, it was something that I stumbled into. So I left school in grade 10. And decided that I didn't want to be doing school anymore. I wanted to be earning some money. So my father gave me the advice basically to go out there and get a job. And because my report cards had all said Jody spends all of her time, talking all day, he said, well, you better get out there and find something that you can talk all day and you'll do great. So funnily enough, I walked the streets, and back then you looked in the paper for any jobs that were around, and just stumbled across a real estate agency. I was looking for a receptionist or a secretarial position, and just so happened to be real estate.
There you go. So you're like one person who can say they've been in real estate all their life.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Darren, work say to me, you know what? You've been in real estate for longer than I've been alive.
Darren, you can't say you've been in real estate all your life. You did insurance.
When I was 17 years of age.
Yeah.
Management, very green. I had an afro that would make the Jackson 5 jealous. I look back now and I look at those days and I just shake my head and think, what was I thinking?
Well, it's quite funny about being in real estate from when I was 15. When my daughter turned 15, quite a few years ago now, I just used to look at her and think, wow, that's the age that I was when I started, and how did I manage it back then?
Yeah, that's crazy. So what was your buzz in real estate when you first started? Like what was it that kept you in the game? Was it the people?
Yeah, look, I think I used to get an immense amount of satisfaction from helping people in their life. So I used to actually really think and be in the moment when we were finding somebody a home, and it used to make me really proud and happy that I could find a home for someone. And I did a lot of leasing, obviously, in the early days, and it just made me feel really good. And now it's pretty much the same. It's still about the people and about the families. And even though I'm not so hands-on with actually dealing directly with the families now, it's still about the people, but it's about our people and getting their lives better and getting them into their own home. And for whatever reason, the way I'm built, that just makes me feel good.
Yeah, I think most of the people that I meet that are doing really successful in real estate are the people that want to help people, I must say. I mean, Jody Stanton, she's a prime example of that too. She just enjoys helping people or making the industry better or whatever the case, So I think it's a really important attribute. So Jody, obviously you're 15, You know, you're walking into the office for the very first time, you know, and just as you're about to open that office door for the first time, you get a tap on the shoulder, you look over your left shoulder, and it's you. It's you today, standing in front of you, 15 years of age. What advice do you give yourself before you walk into that door?
I think the number one thing is never lose sight of why you're there. If you go into any job thinking that you're doing it to make money or you're doing it just to have a job or whatever your reasons are, if you forget that it's really about the people that you want to help or that it's about the customer, about the client, then you're never really going to get to where you want to be. And I think the people who aren't doing it for the right reasons never really succeed, not to a large level.
So we got a bit of a pregnant pause at the moment. You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah. I don't know if it's you or me.
I don't know. We're sort of struggling a little bit. So, all right, I'm gonna take over a little bit here.
Yep, you do that.
Yeah. How many staff do you have on board at Coronis?
In the property management team, we've got 75 at the moment. That's property managers and BDMs.
Wow.
We are growing at the moment, though. We're trialling a few different things where we have really great technology that we've implemented over the last 12 months. And so we're finding now that we can grow the capacity of number of properties managed per person within our department. But at the same time, we don't want to ever lose the fact that we are there for the customer and we want to still be delivering that great service. So how do we go about doing that and allowing the technology to support us through that process? So even though we had that technology in place, our team is growing. To get to the next level, we need to really start to build our capabilities again. What we find as we've grown over that period of time is that you kind of hit a glass ceiling every couple of years, and then it's finding that way to smash through it again. And usually we find it needs more people to do that. So instead of going backwards and started, ratioing our staff over that, we've decided that we're going to move forward and put on some more BDMs, start with a few different growth strategies. We've never done commercial before. We haven't done a lot of B2B work before. So we're focusing on those areas and implementing BDMs to take ownership of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Just to explain B2B for everyone that's listening, that's business to business versus business to client. So a tip, get on LinkedIn, because that's a prime way of getting business to business, where you can bypass the gatekeepers if you want to go straight to a business. So if you're trying to network with a mortgage broker and you call the office, you basically get stuck to the person at reception saying they're busy. But LinkedIn allows you to get direct access to that business owner. But B2B is business.
Yes. Thank you.
So moving on, you said that you're going to have to bring in, about 1,000 properties a year. Is that right, just to remain stable?
Yes, yeah. We have a very high level sales team, and we do actively sell off our rent roll. So we never really, the leaders of our business all work very well together to make sure that all parts of the business thrive and that we're there to deliver on whatever the client needs whenever they need it. So I found in a lot of real estate agencies, their property manager gets very frustrated and annoyed when the sales team is selling off the rental properties. We actually embrace that. But we embrace it in a way with our culture where we can openly go to each other and say, well, this is fantastic. It's the best thing for the landlord. Let's get the property sold, but hey, you owe me one, so you really need to get in there and start handing over some more leads.
Well, I think the properties are going to get sold, and a lot of agencies make the mistake. They don't have the relationship and wonder why the property listing goes to another brand altogether. So well
Yes.
done for focusing on that. So how many BDMs do you have focused on growth?
We've got 14 at the moment,
Wow.
building to 20 at this point of time.
Wow, that's huge. Okay,
Mm.
so let's talk about your points of difference. And what are the biggest 3 points of difference that you've got when your BDMs sit in front of a client and the client says, well, you know, we can deal with such and such agency down the road. Why should we deal with Coronis? What's the difference that Coronis makes? What do your BDMs say or use?
Yeah, I think we attack that in two different ways because, funnily enough, I think it's two separate things. There are certain things that an agency does that makes them all better than other agents and that makes them well or good operationally. But there's also a mindset that we have to change when we're in the room with the landlord. And I believe that the main things that landlords want is they want to know that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. They want to know that you're going to put them first, or at least, you know, care about your job and care about them most importantly. And what I think that's emerging over more and more over the last few years is that landlords, they want you to know your stuff. They don't want you to just be talking to them about what you can do on a day-to-day basis to manage their property or manage their tenant. They're looking at this from an investment perspective. This is about their future, about their lives and what their legacy that they're setting up for their children. So if you're just in there talking about the day-to-day things you can do from a property management perspective, and let's face it, we all have those. You know, ours is the footprint of the 24 offices, the fact that we're all company owned, so they get the benefit of the prospective tenants across all of those offices, not just the one. We talk about our NPS score being at positive 48 as opposed to, you know, -9 or whatever the industry is there. We talk about our landlord portal, our 4.9 plus, you know, marketing reviews. So there's all those things that we talk about on a day-to-day basis. But what landlords really need to know is just that you're going to put their best interests first, and that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and that you're going to be available to them. And you understand that this is about their future, not to, you know, the landlords don't bring on tenants or get investment properties just so they can provide a home for a tenant. It's about their life and their future. And I think the best BDMs that I know actually are very good at reading the clients. And I find that is a skill that's not being taught as well as it should be with BDMs. And we all talk about it being about listening to the client. But I think some people don't actually really get that. I think they think that they're just going to sit there and not say anything so the landlord can have their say, and then spend that whole time while they're supposedly listening trying to work out what they're going to say next, as opposed to actually really listening to what the owner wants. And generally they'll give you signs, and they'll talk about, if they're frequently talking about wanting stability or knowing how much is going to go in their bank account at the end of the month. Well, you have to be able to read that person as being a security conscious person, and be able to offer them solutions like, well, how about we do a fixed fee, or how about we, you know, we've got the best program out there so that your trust accounting can be confident it's going to be in there on the same day, every single day, and or every single month. There's lots of things that we can talk about in that regard.
Wow, that's amazing. I think, Dennis, I think it certainly can't be understated, the importance of being able to read people. And I you know, I know you're very good at that as a BDM. This guy can walk into a room and, you know, survey the room immediately where people are at and read people very, very well. And it's a skill, I believe, absolutely. I think that to listen and then put together the pieces and come up with a tailored solution simply by listening is what's going to fit exactly what the client wants, and that is going to build the trust really, really fast.
Yeah, well, there's actually 4 types of listening, which is really interesting, and Jody touched on 3 of them there. I don't even know if she realised it, but you know, the typical salesperson, the mistake that they make is if they ask a question, they're not actually listening to the person's response. If they don't say yes or no, right? There's a yes or no when you should be asking a question for the business, when you're asking if they'll sign with you. And if they're going into an excuse, the recipient, the salesperson isn't actually listening to them. They're thinking of the next thing they're going to say. And that's the biggest mistake they make. You've actually got to have more of an empathetic listening, where you're actually listening to the core ingredient of what they're saying. So then you know how to overcome that.
Yes.
You know, so, you know, actually, but a good BDM or a good salesperson will actually know that before they get to the appointment. And that's what we train on. You know, you need to know what the concerns of your clients are when you're first calling them. For example, if you're calling a client where their property's sitting vacant, their problem is they're not actually getting any money.
Mm.
The issue is, and even if they say, I'm happy with my current manager, well, you can turn around and then say, but they're actually not working at your best interest if it's empty at the moment, or you can move into it. So it certainly puts a smile on my face listening to you talking about the 2 ears and the one mouth, right?
Yes.
How many times was I told that at school? Dennis, you've got one mouth to talk, you've got two to listen, and it's so true. It's about you ask the question and you listen twice.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think it's the same when you're competing on fees. I think owners, they just want you to be honest.
Mm.
And I've always been very direct with our staff in saying that they should just be saying exactly how it is.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd love to be able to compete on fees, but to do that, we would have to put in inexperienced people who aren't going to be looking after your best interest. And rather than compete on fees, I'd rather you pay me the full amount and then us go down the path of making sure that we save you money and actually make you money by having lower vacancy factors, by having, we've got buying power around maintenance. There's a lot of things that we have from a beneficial point of view for the owners, making sure properties are, tenants move out on Mondays, so they're not guaranteed the 2-day vacancy. There's so many things that we can do to add value and actually save them our fees 100 times over.
Wow, that's awesome. That's
being an office that actually collects the rent, because it doesn't matter what anyone's offering you. If they're not collecting the rent, they're not actually charging you a fee. So there's so many areas where we can teach people that it's not about the fee we're charging. It's about how much we're saving the owner.
Yes.
And look, most of the time, an owner would rather their property sit vacant for a couple of days in knowing that you guys will secure a better quality tenant.
Absolutely. It's about the long term for them, and that's what
Yep.
people are forgetting, I think, in that piece.
Yeah. Mm.
But let's move on, and I just want to now go back to something that you mentioned before, and I think we need to spend some time there, Jody, talking about your Net Promoter Score. Now, a lot of people know what that is, but some people don't. So what is the Net Promoter Score? How does that work? How do you establish what a score is?
Okay, so how NPS works, it's used in a lot of different industries, and it talks about promoters and detractors. So the way I deliver this to my team, because obviously it's with new people that are coming on, they generally, some people aren't familiar with it. And obviously when we did the rollout of this, it was instantly, property managers particularly don't like change for starters. They also don't necessarily like being measured. It's not like, salespeople like to see their name at the top of the scoreboard, where property managers kind of like to just deliver a really good service and fly under the radar a little bit. So talking about, rating them and ranking them against each other and all of that was not very popular in the beginning. But when we worked through the process around that, and there's obviously things we could have done better, but we basically delivered it in a way that if you are, promoters rate you a 9 or a 10, detractors are anything from 6 and under, and then the ones in the middle just think you're average, basically. So they either think you're a great, a 9 or a 10, they think you're terrible, a 6 and under, or, you're average and in between. So we didn't want to be average. We certainly didn't want to be down the bottom. So we decided that we were going to be in the 9s and 10s.
Okay.
And,
just the next question. So what question were you asking where a person would rate 9, 10, 6? What was the leading question?
Of course. It was basically how likely are you to refer your friends and family to Coronis?
Yeah.
That was the question that was recommended to us, and we tossed around all sorts of different questions that we could use. But at the end of the day, that was the one that really delivered on what we wanted.
And it matters the most, isn't it? It's from the book, The Ultimate Question, isn't it?
Yes.
And okay, so just moving on with this, Dennis, for the first time, we've added that question to our evaluations, and we did that in Phoenix when we had our a couple of weeks ago. We did a one-day event in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, and I think we came out with a lot of 9s and 10s, which is good for us to start measuring that way as well. But let's just keep on going with this. So firstly, Jody, what is the industry, the property management industry average with the Net Promoter Score? What's normal out there?
What's normal out there, and it changes a lot, it's about -9, I think, at the moment. When we started, it was around -27, or we were certainly around that -27, which was horrifying. But now we've managed to get to +48, but that's been a very long time coming. It's been a big job. Andrew, when he first said that we were going, the industry was -27 and we were going for +50, you can imagine my reaction to that. And I instantly thought, that's impossible and we're never going to get there. And then he said, and I want you to include, the tenants that are pulling their managements. We want you to include loss managements. We want you to include after you've taken tenant's bond. And I went, well, that's just never going to happen. But here we are at...
let's get realistic on this, because we know that we can't please everybody.
No.
You're going to have a tenant that did the wrong thing. You're going to have to deduct from their bond, and they're going to get upset about it. Yes. And you're asking them to score you as well.
Yes, we call it the ugly truth, and it really is that. But what it does allow us to understand is when tenants are moving out of a property and they don't leave it in the way that you want them to leave it, you still have to handle that situation with dignity. You need to treat them with respect. You need to explain, why. And look, you're never going to be able to, there are some people that are just not going to be happy no matter what. But I believe it has made our team conscious about the tenants that we put into properties, knowing that they're going to be surveyed when those tenants are leaving. And that's not the only reason. You want them to be focused on finding the right tenant regardless, and they truly are that. It's just another lever, I suppose, that makes them conscious of that.
I mean, with so many staff, I think that's quite a challenge. But okay, let's just go a little bit deeper. So with the Net Promoter Score, you're obviously looking deeply at the complaints. What are the top 3 perhaps complaints or issues that you had to deal with, that you had to turn around? What were the top 3 struggles?
The top 3 struggles were, the first one was around mindset of our property managers. I think the initial thing there was that they just felt like we were trying to catch them out and make them feel like they weren't doing a good job, where it wasn't that at all. It was around just, we have a philosophy around continual improvement. And we would never expect for people to go from, stop to the end thing in 5 minutes. It's just got to be that everyday continual improvement around what you can do better every day to make a better experience for the customer or for our landlords and our tenants. And it was really around having the mindset of focusing on tenants and making sure that we cared about them as much as we cared about our landlords, because I think that has to be a very even piece, and it's not all that way. We do always talk about, and lots of people do, I'm sure, about happy tenant, happy landlord, happy wife, happy life. It does go part and parcel, and but getting the property manager's mindset around that was difficult. The second piece was we did it wrong in the beginning, to be honest. We went out there and we used a program that basically just told us what our score was. It didn't actually identify why people were unhappy. So we then went down that path of wanting to understand why they weren't happy and then fixing their problems as we went along. We made the decision very early, and we realised that the only thing worse than surveying landlords all the time, and landlords and tenants, they don't like being surveyed all the time, but they will happily do it, and you can keep the engagement if you are fixing their problems. So the only thing worse than surveying them in their mind is surveying them and they're not fixing the problem. So where we actually went down that path of making sure that every single issue was resolved, and that every single client and every person that completed a survey was contacted, then that helped change the property manager's mindset in as much as, no, this is actually about just making things better for the client, not about, showing me that I'm doing something wrong.
And obviously, when you get these, these NPS scores, etc., it's then giving you tools that show potential clients of the satisfaction that your tenants have got, your owners have got, your tradespeople, or whoever else you're using, because they're using Coronas, they're happier, and then they can become part of that so-called family as well.
Yes, well, that's become a beautiful benefit. It wasn't what was there initially. It was more about, solving problems and identifying at-risk customers and delivering the good service. We actually then did things like tie the NPS score in with our rankings for the property managers. So a property manager at Coronas can't win any awards unless they have a customer service level. So even if they're our, best property manager on paper and they're not delivering an excellent customer service experience, then they can't win any awards. The same with our BDMs. They might sign up the highest number of managements, but if they don't have a certain level of NPS, then they can't win an award. They can't go to Centurion. They can't get the benefits of that we deliver as an agency.
I think the ultimate question is just so important, isn't it? It really does summarize everything that we do, is how well are they going to refer us to their friends and colleagues and so forth. But I do want to do a little bit more digging and go back a little bit. What were some of the top things that people were unhappy about with your service that you took on the challenge to change? Because there's a lot of offices out there that get complaints, but they don't do anything about it. You've taken the complaints, go, okay, we're weak in this area, but what were the things that they're unhappy about that you changed and helped, of course, push your net promoter score right around? What were a couple of those big things?
It's whenever we did the word cloud, we did, I don't know if everyone's familiar with word clouds, but the program that we use allows us to do that. And what was always coming through really strongly in the early days was the communication. It was always communication, one thing after another. And what we established, so we set out about, when we did NPS, we survey our clients at different touch points, so we could identify whether it was around a maintenance situation, a lease renewal situation, a vacancy, and so on. And that way it enabled us to do a number of things. And firstly, it enabled us to do training around the areas that we were weak in. Maintenance was one of those areas. I think maintenance is always a pain point for landlords. They tend to feel like you're not doing or not putting enough effort into finding the cheapest creditor or and we could do some educational pieces around that to show that we didn't necessarily, it wasn't in the owner's best interest to find the cheapest creditor. It was around finding the right creditor to do the right job, and then if they didn't do it properly, that they would go back free of charge and do it properly and rectify the situation. So, we were able to do some educational pieces around, you don't want a cheap and nasty creditor, so to speak. Or the educational piece around our team, where we could be talking to them around, well, you need to explain this a little bit better. And the communication thing, what we found, which is really interesting, and I think you'll find that in a lot of different agencies, property managers are very task-based. So they get in there and they rush around and they get the job done, but then they don't ring the landlord to tell them that they've done it. So here they are thinking they've done a wonderful job, they've got everything done, and then the landlord's on the other side going, I can't stand my property manager, they haven't got the job done, when the whole time it was done. So it was just let us do those tiny little things or add those extra steps in to contact the landlord to rectify that.
Wow, that's great. I know that the number one complaint that owners have about property managers globally is lack of communication. And the number one complaint that tenants have about property managers globally is repairs and maintenance. So well done.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Now, just before we finish and wrap this podcast up, Jody, you have a maintenance crew, is that correct?
Yes. So, we have a maintenance division that we have separate to the business. We do smoke alarms, building and pest inspections. What we found was we wanted to be able to deliver a really good service to landlords, and unfortunately some of the creditors, we had very little control over creditors and the people who actually did the work. So we wanted to be able to have buying power for our landlords, and we wanted to be able to deliver a good service, because if the creditors didn't go out there when they were meant to go out there, then it reflected badly on us as a business. So we wanted to take a little bit more control of that. And even though we subcontract to our creditors, we do use creditors who've been with us for a really long time, so that we can control that pricing point, and we can control the level of service that's delivered to a degree. I mean, obviously it's still the creditor's business, but
Yeah.
for us it was important that they put our owners first.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's really good.
And very quickly, also, you guys have a training academy as well.
We do. Look, I'm very passionate about training, and it's really important that we deliver a good service again in that regard. So I find that a lot of property managers the industry itself will teach you the paperwork that you have to fill out. They'll teach you all the logistics around being a property manager, but they don't actually really teach you how to be a property manager. So although we do the licensing through our training academy, we do more on the what happens on a day-to-day basis and how can you be really good at that, because we don't want we want the industry to be better as a whole. We want people going out there and making sure that they help the industry as opposed to detracting from the industry. And what you guys deliver in that regard as well, from with new business and continually getting better in that regard and training people to be the best that they can be, is what we absolutely need in the industry. And we just want to do our part in that too.
Well, our focus is their future, right? So we all want the industry to be better, because it's interesting. Australia really does do an amazing job of leading the way in property management globally, because it's so legislated. There's so much good competition. So you've got to be even better, and I suppose one thing that we get, Darren, is a lot of people say to us, oh, but my opposition's coming to your training. You know what? So what? Let them all come. Because it's only going to raise the bar around you in your area.
Corona's right there at the tippy top as well. And
it's
a real privilege to speak with you, Jody. Thank you so much for sharing. We also appreciate what you shared at our IGT 2019 conference. People are still talking about it, of course, talking about the lovely Jody Stainton as well and her session. And I just think you guys have got so much to offer us. The Corona story is new to me, and so really, it's very refreshing story to hear. I know, Dennis, you've been working with Coronis a long time now, but I just want to say thank you very much. Now, Jody, if anyone's got any questions, how can they get in contact with you? What's your email address?
The best way to contact me is at Jody, which is JODI, at coronis.com.au.
Okay, well done. So thank you very much, Dennis. Anything more you wanted to ask?
No, I just love listening to the passion. I was just sitting here, just listening and taking it in. And I think it's absolutely great. It's just awesome to know, especially I love the academy. To me, it's just, it's brilliant, because I remember I did my certificate at the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales, and they had a salesperson teach you about prospecting, and it was so basic. And then they teach you how to fill in forms, and they teach you legislation, and that was it.
Yes.
That was it. They didn't even go through the back end of the agency agreements. It was just how to complete one. And, the on-the-job stuff is just phenomenal. It really is. So I think it's brilliant. But
I know Coronis is
it
all
certainly knows why you guys lead the way.
It's all about putting people first, and that's really, really so. Thank you so much, Jody, for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jody.
Okay.